I mean, he knows everything.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, everyone. The time being 9 a.m. On February 16th, I'd like to call the Kane County Judicial and Public Safety Committee meeting to order. Could we have roll call, please, Savannah?
Gums. Miss Gums.
Gumps here, between here and there.
Linder here.
Roth.
Roth here.
Pepe.
Debbie here.
Williams.
Williams here.
Leonard.
Leonard here.
And Molina. We have quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone here for public comment or online? Seeing and hear no one, we'll move on to monthly financial reports. I would like to ask for unanimous consent though before on the approval of the minutes.
Debbie, ask for unanimous consent.
Roth was second.
So second.
Any objections? If not, we will approve the minutes as stated in our agenda. Public comment now, seeing and hearing from no one either online or in person. We'll move on to the monthly financial reports. Do we have anyone here from the financial department?
Okay, good enough.
If not, we do have the monthly financial reports on our agenda, so those are attached. A Merit Commission report. And once again, those monthly reports are also attached, so we'll use those. Our next person up is Ms. Guthrie for KingCom. Good morning.
Good morning. I don't have a lot this morning. Our monthly reports are on file. Just some 911 historical data to share. It was 55 years ago that the first 911 call was placed in Alabama. So I thought I'd share that with the group this morning, 55 years, and the phones have not stopped since. So we anticipate a very busy day ahead with the weather for our team. Our focus remains on hiring and training, and that's something you will consistently hear from me for the next couple of months. And that's all I have this morning.
Any questions for Ms. Guthrie? Thank you very much. We are going to move on now to the sheriff's report. Sheriff Fain or Under Sheriff Johnson, whoever would like to.
I'd like to walk in a dramatic fashion. Mr. Leonard.
Well, we appreciate it.
PowerPoint clicker. It's already there. Great. Thank you.
Could do if you need a minute or two, so we can move on to emergency management and then come back to you.
Sure, if you'd like.
Okay. We'll go to the Office of Emergency Management. Mr. Mensching, I believe you're online. Do you have a report for us?
I do. I have the submitted report that you guys have as part of your packet. We've been in the process of trying to meet a lot of the new state requirements that are coming down from IEMA. We did get a little reprieve in that two of our requirements got pushed back to next year. That being our emergency operations plan update and also the accreditation process. So that both of those are major projects that got pushed back a year. They're going to a 3-year cycle as opposed to a 2, which should change our workload a little bit. We're still in the process of trying to separate everything out, coming out from underneath the sheriff's office. We found a couple other items that still need to be worked on financially, which will be coming to you probably in the next month or so to have that worked out. We are on there's a resolution that we've worked with Water Resources on for the program grant to hire a contractor to assist us with, I believe this is the contractor for, or no, I'm sorry, this is the emergency management grant that we have to go through every year that reimburses us from IEMA and FEMA for what we are able to accomplish meeting all the state criteria.
Okay, I'd like to ask you one question if I could about that. I see where the grant will not exceed $215,262. And it looks like half of that is a reimbursable expense and the other half is an outright grant from the state of Illinois. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'm not 100% up to speed on how the grant works as it's constantly evolving for IEMA. They've been working on the funding model to better distribute grant money throughout the state to bring programs up. It's based on population figures, which you would think we would be doing real well given the population of Kane. But as they're trying to now move that, it's a cost sharing grant. It started out as 50% of our administrative costs were covered by them, and as the pot has been split out into other counties, our share has kind of dwindled over the years, and so that's where those numbers come from, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, thank you for that explanation. What I need is a motion and a second to move this resolution forward for discussion.
Deputy seconds.
Move, who was at the, oh, Mr. Linder moved and Mr. Tepe seconded. Any discussion, questions? If not, Savannah, would you please do the roll call?
Gums. Ms. Gums,
Yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Deputy, yes.
Williams,
Williams, yes.
Leonard.
Leonard, yes.
Passes.
Resolution passes. Anything else, Mr. Menching, that you'd like to discuss?
Not at this time, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time and your reports.
Thank you.
We will now move on to the sheriff. Sheriff Fain.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard, for your consideration of moving us around. The younger kids' school bus was running late this morning, so that's life, right? Blair's going to cue that up for me. I do have a very brief PowerPoint for State's Attorney Mosser, because she enjoys that when I do it. As we close out our 2022 annual report, which should be out by the end of the month, it's a 70-page document typically that you all will receive. It's my kind of reading, though. It's mostly pictures, so and graphs. But we want to point out our financials, of course, after the conversation on Tuesday. We're always very transparent with our money at the sheriff's office. And so I just wanted to show that once again, 4 years in a row, we've come in under budget. In 2022, we did still include OEM expenses in that budget, and we ratified 5 out of our 6 collective bargaining unit contracts. So of course, that increases our cost when we talk about personnel. With that, we have to remember that just like any typical government agency, we're 81% personnel of our budget. And as I mentioned before, 4 out of those 6 CBAs, we're proud to say we were able to absorb that salary increase within our existing budget without having to come back for a budget adjustment, which is always appealing to everybody. I do want to point out some of our new revenue. We're always looking for inefficiencies at the sheriff's office where we can increase revenue and where we can cut corners, of course. Sheriff's deputies do outside details, which basically means if you go to a sporting event in the city, you'll typically see like Chicago police officers inside and outside of the building. That's what deputies do here in Kane County as well for various businesses and entities. So we realized that detail fees had not increased since the early 2000s. So we did that in 2021. Or late 2021 into 2022. So you see that we went from 120,000 revenue in details the year before to almost 500,000 this last year. So not only did more deputies participate in the details, but actually more businesses used us even with the increased rate. So nice increase there. We renegotiated our inmate phone account. So we were able to increase our revenue there. So you see, we projected 250K, we brought in just over 300,000. And of course, with our federal relationships, we get reimbursed for some of our employee training. We're only expecting 9,000 last year. We actually brought in 76,000. So, and also in 2021, the county board helped us do a fee study along with county finance. And we realized that our civil processing fees had not been increased since the early 2000s. So that readjustment gave us a 50% increase in our expected revenue for last year. So we're happy to report those things. Some bad news from inside the jail. Fortunately, I'm not all sunshine and roses like I try to be, but we did have an increase in overdose deaths of our returning citizens. We're very proud of our programming in the jail. In 2021, we actually had 0 people go through our programming and reenter and release. Unfortunately, last year we were up to 4 that came through and passed. And also on the safety side, we had an increase in violence within the jail. So detainee fights is the blue bar in 2022. And in the orange bar, that is attacks on officers. And it's important to point out that there were 14 attacks on officers. 7 of those involved people with severe mental health issues. And I do point to the fact that Department of Human Services, our State Department of Human Services, has done a horrible job of picking people up from our jail and getting them into proper care. During the assault gun ban, at the same time that legislation was being passed, counterintuitively, our legislators also passed a law that delayed the amount of time that our state had to take people into proper mental health care. So rather frustrated, I must say. And on the police work side, just a quick snapshot. We'll have more in that annual report, but this is a great work that our drug team does. You see the amount of cash seizures, vehicles, assault weapons, and 32 kilograms of fentanyl getting off our streets. That's outstanding. So just want to give you all a snapshot of that. If there's any questions on that, I'll field them now. Otherwise, we have a simple resolution to follow.
Any questions for Mr. Williams?
Sheriff, the $4 million in cash seizure, where does that go?
So first it goes to Washington, DC, and then they decide how it gets dispersed. So we get anywhere from 80% of that down to 5 to 20% of that, depending on if our deputies were assisted by other agencies in the seizure.
Mr. Lindner?
Well, whatever is returned, it goes into your budget.
Yes, it comes back in our asset forfeiture
Yeah.
funds. Yep. And then we've used that for the last 4 years. We do provide that in our monthly reports. And we have used that over the last 4 years to cut down our overall general fund budget. So that's how we're able to come in under every year.
Any other questions? You know, one point I'd like to make is, as the sheriff had mentioned, in the last 4 years, 19, 20, 21, 22, we're still not done yet. But the sheriff has returned over $1 million to the general fund each and every year. So especially for new people on the board that may not be aware of it. Yes, it's a very big department, the sheriff's department, but it's also very efficient and it is returned to the general fund over $1 million a year. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sheriff, I think you have a resolution. Would you
We do.
explain that to us?
So this is going to be, I brought this up, I believe, a month or two ago in this committee that we're acquiring a south substation for our patrol operations. The property is owned by Fox Valley Park District. It's a nice old building that works perfectly for an office area. We had always had north and south substations for the sheriff's office, and those went away about a decade ago. So we're able to find this building, and the rent is $500 a month, very cheap. And we're going to be able to cover that within our own existing operating budget. Also, Chris Caius wanted me to bring up maintenance for this building. The exterior will be covered by Fox Valley Park District. We just have to work out the minor details of who's going to be cleaning the inside once a week. So it'll either be building management or we'll hire another firm to do it for us.
Okay, I need a motion and a second to discuss this, and possibly move it forward.
Roth makes the motion.
Linder second.
Moves, Mr. Lindner seconds. Any questions, discussions about this resolution? If not, roll call, please.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Deppie, yes.
Williams,
Williams, yes.
Leonard.
Leonard, yes.
Passes.
Anything else, Sheriff, or not? Thank you very much for your report. State's Attorney, Ms. Mosser.
Good morning. Our financial reports are on file for everyone to review. I do have 2 resolutions, and then we also have a PowerPoint presentation, which will be much more in detail and interesting because Terry Hunt is giving it. Our first resolution is ratifying an emergency purchase for 3 vehicles for the state's attorney's office.
I need a motion and a second to discuss and possibly move forward.
Deppie moves.
Tepe moves,
Roth seconds.
Ross seconds. Discussions on this resolution? Any questions?
Can I bring up a point on that?
Yes.
If you don't
yes,
mind,
sir.
I know I'm not.
Go right ahead, Sheriff.
But one inefficiency that's really troubled me over the last 4 years is a lot of our agents or entities, divisions and offices have been taking their fleet vehicles out for service at, just any random outside entity. We have 2 very large fleet garages here in Kane County, the Sheriff's Office and KDOT. And I've argued hard for us to take on the brunt of a lot of those fleet services. So we're really happy to say we're finally getting the building management vehicles taken care of at the Sheriff's Office Fleet Garage. We're working on the State's Attorney's Office, and we hope to bring more on, like probation, once we hire just one more mechanic to be able to field all of that. So I think that will increase a lot of efficiency and save the county a lot of money.
Well, thank you, Sheriff. So not only are you returning $1 million a year, now you're taking care of vehicle maintenance also.
Trying to.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Tuppy?
does that apply to board members' vehicles?
As the state's
Tesla
attorney,
chargers.
no.
Charging station.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And no car washes for.
Any other questions?
I guess I just have a quick question.
Yes, Mr. Williams.
Did we look at Kane County Ford dealers? I know we went to Kendall County. I'm just curious why we are buying from another county.
Please.
Well, it was strictly supply and demand. We did get quotes from two other dealers in Kane County. Neither of them had the vehicles in stock at the time, and we were in dire need of replacement.
Thank you.
You know, I think that's a great question there, Mr. Williams. You know, I spoke with Mr. Hunt about these vehicles and he showed me the spreadsheet of everyone he contacted. It was very, very difficult to locate the 3 vehicles. So I thank you for doing that. If there are no other questions or discussion, could we have a vote on that, please?
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Pepe,
Happy, yes.
Williams,
Williams, yes.
Leonard.
Yes. Ms. Mosser, you had another resolution too?
We do. We have a budget adjustment that we're seeking, and all that this is doing is taking money for 2 investigators who are assigned to our Child Advocacy Center from the general fund and just putting it in the Advocacy Center fund. So it's just obvious where those individuals are getting paid from. So we're not asking for any additional money yet. This is just a shift.
So truly, this is a bookkeeping resolution.
Correct. And whatever makes Terry Hunt's life easier, I will do.
Great. I need a motion. And
Linder
second.
moves.
This forward.
Roth will second.
Linder moves, Ross seconds. Any questions? Discussion? If not, vote please.
Gums. Ms. Gums. Linder,
Linder, yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Pepe,
Happy, yes.
Williams,
Williams, yes.
Leonard.
Leonard, yes.
Passes?
Now, I think we have the pleasure of having a presentation by Mr. Hunt now.
We do.
If Blair can do the switch now? Yes.
While we're waiting on that, I just wanted to mention that Miss Molina is not here today. She was not able to attend, so that's why I'm chairing today, but I'm sure she'll be back for next month's meeting.
Okay, apologize for the transition there, but on earlier this week, Madam Chair, at the county board meeting, challenged the county board members to take a deep dive into the general fund budget, which I think is an excellent suggestion. As something of a public service, though, she pointed out the county board budget booklet, which is it's a really super cool 600-page document. Joe Onzik and Erica Wagner and that whole team in finance do a wonderful job putting that together. They've earned the GFOA Certificate of Excellence for a number of years in a row. It is very, very thorough. It is very comprehensive. It meets all the professional standards. It exceeds industry standards. The problem with that as a document is it is a snapshot. It is a static document that represents the budget at a specific point in time. It does not allow for easy manipulation because it's in a PDF form or a printed form if you're actually looking at the physical document. And it doesn't reflect any changes that happen. For example, the resolutions, the budget amendments that are going forward now, as soon as they are approved by the county board, they will be included in the budget if you use the tool that we created a few years ago. And this is It's very easy to get to. This is the county homepage. And right here is the open finance icon. And that will take you straight into a number of options. But in order to help you with your analysis, with your deep dive, if you will, it's sticky here. Come on. Well, your mouse isn't working. How can we drag the mouse down, Blair?
There it is.
Ah, all right. Yeah, the wild. Yeah, well, we still have to find it. I give up. It is really, there you go. All right, so we're looking at, we're going to focus on the budgeted expenses. So you click on the Explore button. Up here at the top, we're going to look at FY23. So that's instantly going to pull up our budget. We're looking specifically here at the general fund. So we'll take the drawdown there, pick up the general fund, and this is the number that was referenced earlier, $123.27 million in the general fund. It defaults in this format where it's a bar graph. You can easily convert all these to, if I don't lose my mouse again, come on. My cursor keeps getting away from me, but if we can get over here to the pie chart. Can you click on that, Blair? He's just jumping all over the place. Wiggle my mouse. That sounds,
We're not even gonna go down that road.
yeah, there's. I apologize for that. Can you come wiggle my mouse? This, because it's in I need a mouse pad. Is that what we need? Oh, yeah, maybe this will work.
You maybe need a new mouse. Yeah.
Try the unmouse.
This is really much easier than I'm making it look. Well, I'm going to concede here if I can't make it.
Want to borrow my mouse?
Will your mouse work better?
Yeah. Well, better. Here, it's a,
Oh, anybody's mouse or mice or whatever is going to.
Mises.
Mises.
well, no wonder you got a bug here right on the line.
I'm. Oh, he is.
Try using the touchpad.
Better.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Let me see.
If anybody's mouse or mice or whatever it is.
That better.
Mises.
Got a bug here right on.
It refuses to scroll into the pie chart. So we'll just leave it
All right.
in this format, although.
Try using the touchpad.
But then
You've got pie charts right up there, Terry.
yeah, but the thing is, those are static. They aren't going to change. When we want to go here and identify any one of the offices or departments, you could go in and click the state's attorney. You could click the subdivision of the criminal division. You can pull up all of the individual expenses. And if I can make this scroll down for those people who would prefer to see it in pure numbers as opposed to those handy dandy charts that we can't always see. It's a very easy way to get around and to focus on whichever office or department or expense level you'd like to see. We've done this example for only the general fund, but you see, it will not, the mouse refuses to go to the pie chart, which is probably the format that you're most familiar with seeing. So Yeah, it just jumps right over that. Okay, so anyway, that was, if anybody needs help, call me, come to my office. We'll work on a screen that actually is more easily navigated. And if you have other specific questions, I can walk you through that. But Blair, can we switch to the PowerPoint then? Thank you. I appreciate the effort. Yeah. All right, so there we are. All right, so here we go. All right. So again, this is a PowerPoint that was put together. We didn't have time to get it on the agenda, but even then it wouldn't have been an actionable item. We're looking to present this information to the members of this committee for their consideration information, but it's not a new subject. It's something that we've done often in the past, and it is purely an updated version of the information that was presented earlier in the year here. So, all right. So basically, this is the sort of information that has been provided before, but it's been updated. Between the time that we started the 2023 FY 2023 budget, we've lost 13 ASAs, 16 staff members. So in 7 months, we've lost 16% of the attorney, 22% of the staff members that were originally budgeted.
And just to throw that out there, yesterday, another person tendered their resignation, and it's an assistant state's attorney who is in our felony review division. So that number continues to rise.
That's another reason why we couldn't get through. I finished the report yesterday, and they gave me new numbers. And so it is a dynamic situation for us, and one that deserves consideration. So while we realize that there are limitations on what the public sector positions can pay, and we probably aren't competitive with many opportunities that are presented to our qualified attorneys, we think it's reasonable that Kane County should be competitive with other local counties. And among the collar counties, Kane and Lake seem to be the most comparable in terms of population and economic demographics. So we've focused this report on that. The duties for the state's attorneys throughout the state are identical, but our Kane County ASAs and staff are lower, and often much lower than what are paid to the counterparts in Lake County. In order to make the comparisons more reasonable, we adopted the grade level descriptions and naming conventions that Lake County established. In coming up with that, we considered the description of the current position, the duties and responsibilities of the position, the length of time served here with the county. And at the upper grade levels, that's a little bit misleading in some instances because those people are relatively new hires, but they have considerable experience outside of the Kane County family. We targeted the results to include only the full-time positions. The positions that were budgeted but are currently in contingency weren't included. And this is the most current information we can have. It is effective for the salaries that were in place for Kane County as of February 5th and Lake County as of December 30th. So we're talking about the most contemporary information that we can provide that way. So we separated it by grade levels within the ASAs. And this is the comparison. You can see across the board, the red columns are the Kane County average salaries by grade level. The blue is our counterparts in Lake County. And at the left-hand side, the entry-level positions, we're actually very, very competitive at that point at 62,291. But as you'll see in the next slide, as our ASAs are promoted and gain experience, the salary disparity continues to widen. So where we're at initially, we're very competitive. You see the gap between the red and the blue lines gets farther and farther apart as we go through the various levels of the ASAs. That's a way cooler slide than anything that the sheriff had, because it's got. In terms of the overall budget for the Kane County State's Attorney, the salary budgets, and Lake County, you can see it's $1.3 million difference. And it's broken down by the various levels. So here in Kane County, we've got 6.6 million. There are over $8 million budgeted to perform the same functions in Lake County. We mentioned here that we had significant turnover. What happens of the 78 budgeted currently employed minus the one that just left, 37% of those come from our lowest grade levels. Not to say that they're not qualified or promising, but they don't have a lot of court experience and they require a high level of supervision. So 37% over, like a huge component of our ASAs don't have a lot of stuff, less than 10 months experience with the KCSO. The upper level, we're still not where we'd like to be. We've got 46 people at the upper levels that have been with our State's Attorney's Office for 5 years or less. And it's really, really challenging to find and hire new ASAs.
Yes.
Well, I know State's Attorney Mosser has banged that drum. Other members of the Justice Partners have as well. I thought it was interesting, though, to find an independent source that substantiates the same sort of information that we've put forward. This is a recent article from Reuters, and I've got the link available. Anybody would like to read the whole thing? But basically, these are some of the highlights. There are very, very few applicants for open jobs. As a result, ASAs are handling double the number of cases recommended by the American Bar Association. And Attorney Sam Gill, who made the really interesting point, says crime has not dissipated in any significant way to offset the backlog, which I think is pretty common sense, but it's interesting as well. As a result of fewer district attorneys being able to prosecute, you have to make decisions when you don't have sufficient staff. And so you let certain crimes go unprosecuted. In the example cited here from Arizona, the cases prosecuted dropped from 2/3 to less than a half in 2020. And the vacancies in those offices rose to 53% between July 2020 and April 2022. As we said before, the prosecutors typically earn less than private sector lawyers. But we had the added advantage sometimes of better working conditions, being able to work for people like State's Attorney Mosser offset some of the attractiveness in the pure earnings. But the hiring market has just widened. In the average salary level for an entry-level state prosecutor in 2020 across the states, 68,000. If you remember back a few slides ago, we're at 62. And starting levels salaries for private sector firms are as high as $200,000. This is the situation in Denver, Colorado. He had 10 new job openings to post because they had 80 lawyers on staff. He never received more than 1 or 2 applicants for any of the positions. And 6 months later, still hadn't filled all those vacancies. So as we reiterated here, we had 73 existing staff members. We had some new positions that are budgeted but not filled, and they're not in the consideration. So the staff level or the turnover for existing staff is that 22%. these are all references to staff as opposed to the ASA. So of those 16 openings, we've hired 3. And especially for jobs that require special skills, certifications for investigators or forensic interviewers or bilingual characteristics, we're simply not competitive. So it's become a double-edged sword. As we try to hire more qualified applicants, our salary that's offered works by comparison. This is probably one of the most telling. Our admin staff compared to Lake County. The lowest paid staff position in Lake County is an S4 admin who makes $39,429 a year. By contrast, 34 of the 51 Kane County admins earn less than the lowest paid counterpart. 2/3 of our admin staff, and there are other disparities as well. But that's, to me, that was a staggering figure. These are the breakdowns that we have. The 5 top categories are all, or 4 top categories all have multiple persons within that grade, and the bottom 5 have only 1 position. So it's a straightforward comparison. See the admin assistants there, that first one that we just talked about, 39,000 versus somewhere in the mid 50 range, going all the way across the board through the various job categories. Kane County being the red bar, Lake County being the blue bars. And this is the total staff salary budget by grade level. You can see there's it looks like there's a gap on the Lake County side. That's because they have 2 positions in particular that we don't even have a counterpart for. They have a therapist on staff at over $100,000 and a human traffic manager director. So their overall staff budget is a little bit more than ours, but we have more staff members than they do. They just make a lot more money per staff person than we do here. This is then comparing the average Kane County salary by grade level for the ASAs against their counterparts in Lake County, computing an annual difference and projecting what that cost would be if we were to try to equalize Kane County's salaries with the currently existing Lake County salaries over a period of 2 years. So you've got 78 attorneys, not including the part-timers and law clerks. The various category state's attorney obviously does not fall into the salaries that we control here, but the others all do. And the disparities range from $16,000 to $37,000. Half of that equity adjustment would be $680,000. So that's per year to accomplish that in 2-year period. Same study for the salaried staff, 72 staff members, broken out by grade levels. In 2 instances, our investigators and our grant administrator actually are making comparable studies, so are comparable salaries. So we did not include any adjustment for them. For the balance, the equity adjustment spread over 2 years again. One year would be $379,000 for that group. So this is the sort of the summary combination to accomplish that, to bridging that equity gap. It would be $1,059,000 per year for FY23 and 24. Of that total, $723,000 would come from the general fund. The remainder would come through a combination of special revenue funds. And we haven't considered either any annual increase for our existing staff or the annual increases that will be granted to Lake County in the next couple of years. It will actually push the goalpost a little bit farther. And with that, I'm going to yield. If there are questions as to how this was put together. I have all the supporting documents for that anybody that would like to see them. It will be a peek into a twisted mind with spreadsheets and color codes, but they're all there. Anybody that would like to see them, I'm happy to share them. And otherwise, I'll turn this over to State's Attorney Mosser for questions like from the conceptual perspective.
So one of the reasons why we're bringing this here, and we're not asking for anything from judicial and public safety at this time. What we are going to do is present this again to labor management at a special board meeting, not a special board meeting, but a labor management one, because it says in the code that all both union and non-union salaries and pay needs to be reviewed yearly. Now that happens yearly for union contracts because it's a part of the collective bargaining. That has not traditionally happened for anybody who is non-union, like the state's attorney's office. So we are going to bring this with the proposal to have equity, because I am in a position now where, as Terry said, we are inviting every single board member to come to our office. Terry has done everything that he can to put this in spreadsheets, in pie charts, in bar graphs, and whatever we can to show that we are running an efficient office in which we use every single portion of our money to help keep this community safe. However, that has resulted in us not paying our people in the way that we're supposed to. And I know that this board recognizes that. And I know that this board has been completely generous when we have come to request additional staff. But I can no longer keep the staff employed because of the pay rates. Now, keeping in mind, we compared ourselves to Lake County. It's about an hour plus drive to Lake County. So anybody living here may not go over there. But it is a 20-minute drive to DuPage County, who pays significantly more than we do and significantly more than Lake County. Once upon a time, it was a dream for people to work at state's attorney's offices, and it certainly was for mine. I joke with everybody about my interview with John Barsani, where he said my starting salary would be $38,500, and I said yes. And then he said, but with your experience, I'll give you 40. I'm like, even better. I didn't care about the money. I cared about what happened here. But we're in an economy now where we have to care about money and we have to care about our employees. And the people at my office work so very hard for so very little. So I'm starting here to let you all know on judicial and public safety where you see the good work that we're doing. Come to the office, meet with us, and we'll show you why what we're asking for is completely reasonable for the people to keep them here so we can keep our community safe. I would open it up to questions.
Mr. Linder.
I would hope that you will email this PowerPoint presentation to us so we have some reference. And then after we've internalized that, maybe we can come over and see you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Tepe.
Thank you. Terry, thank you for this eye-opening report. I have two questions about this. One is that the county board had last year brought to our attention pay inequity, and I thought we had addressed part of that in relationship to the state's attorney's office. Is that not correct?
That is not correct because of the way that study was done. That study included us in the comparison. So we were compared to ourselves in coming up with the money that was put aside for the state's attorney's office. That's not how you're supposed to do it. Because what that did is if you have Lake County who's making this, you add us into it, it brings it down. And Terry can explain this a lot better than I can, but it didn't correctly show the inequity between ourselves and other state's attorney's offices because our numbers were put in the equation.
My question was meant to go in a different.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead, Mr. Hunt.
I believe
Was there not money out of that was included in your budget for this year from the pay and equity part that the board had been working on?
So the simple answer to that is no. There is a $900,000 contingency that was built into the overall county budget. Am I speaking into, okay, into the overall county budget for pay equity adjustments across the board, not specifically to our office. That money still is in contingency at this stage of the game. We are scheduled to meet with Human Resources next Thursday, I believe, to consider our particular part of that, but there was, like I said, there were 900,000. There was an estimated 262,000 that was potentially earmarked for the state's attorney's office, but none of that has been released at this point.
Okay, that disturbs me a little bit.
Right.
That should have been released to you.
Right. And so part of my frustration and the reason why I mentioned that the study was wrong is that when you look at how Terry has run this, he has done the correct mathematical formula to actually compare us to Lake County. The one that was run before that earmarked potentially this $262,000 is much lower than what Terry has estimated we should have, because it again put us in that equation.
I understand. You're coming up with a disparity of about 1.4 million, okay? I believe the 262,000 was meant to be matched in the next year, so we were looking at it as $520,000. You are now coming up with some different numbers associated with the disparity. And personally, I think this is very good and it's things we should look at. My second question, my second point is that, you hire somebody and you bring them on board and, a year or 2 years later, they leave you. I think it would be beneficial if you could, and it would be kind of hard to come up with it and it'd be somewhat subjective. If you could come up with, just how much cost it is to train a person and then lose them. Particularly the assistant state's attorneys and those coming in at the junior level. I mean, you've got to put a lot of management into that.
Mhm.
And then when they leave, they've probably got a caseload of more than 50 cases.
Much, much more than 50 cases.
But, you've got a caseload that then has to be redistributed. So I think it might be beneficial to show, just how much it costs us when we lose somebody that comes in and is doing a pretty decent job and then goes to some neighboring county or some other firm. So.
Absolutely. We'll
Thank
do
you.
our best with that.
Yes, Mr. Roth.
I agree with Vern on the training costs. I know in the corporate world, they look at that a lot of times because, if it's 100,000, it's, we're saving there if we don't lose the people. Terry, I had a question on one of the slides. In the comparison with Lake County, you did 6 million to 8 million. What is the employee count on each one? Just because, if there's a huge difference, that could either help our case
Mhm.
or kind of hurt our case. And I don't need the answer now. but
Yeah,
I
Terry,
just-
you could get that to the
Yeah.
committee if you wouldn't
Okay,
mind.
well, that's fine, if you prefer to have it now,
Sure.
I could do
Yeah.
that. The ASA, the state's attorney's staff in Lake County is 148. In Kane County, it's 152. And that apparent differential actually reflects in the fact that we've got more
Right.
lower paid.
Right. It actually helps our case then. So just I wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Ms.
Thank you.
Phelps?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank you for the presentation. It's yet another wonderful one. If you spend any time with our state's attorneys, our sheriffs, anybody on the judicial team, working for Kane County, working in the field, it's different, right? There's a passion for it. There's a passion that I think benefits those folks in Kane County. You said that at some point people wanted to come to the state. You yourself wanted to come to the state's attorney's office because of that passion. Anybody can go get a paycheck doing what you do, double what you make, and then some. I feel like, and over the last week, I feel like I'm window shopping constantly, and I'm walking around the same building, looking in the same windows, because we're not addressing the problem. And the problem is funding. That should be the number one topic, because we know the need. We have heard it for years and we still do not address it. I also note on our pie charts, some of our largest pieces of Pac-Man are the most efficient. And when we're looking to find places to come up with something to benefit the budget, I would reject that. We can't look at every piece of that pie. Every piece of that pie has to be looked at. And perhaps an example should be used by those that are the most efficient. I thought about that all day yesterday, and we can talk and talk and talk about all of these things for another 3 years. But if we don't address this issue, we're going to be talking about it for 10 or 12 more years. So I implore you to be thoughtful in that. These folks need to be paid. We cannot keep them. So all the presentations that you bring me are wonderful, and I understand that. And I know these board members understand that too. But we are charged with a seemingly impossible task, but it's a courage task, right? That's what it's really about. It's about courage. So I really ask you to think about that when you're looking at all of these charts and numbers.
Thank you, Ms. Combs. Mr. Hunt?
Yeah, and I apologize because it's not my meeting, but one of the things that occurred to me while I was doing the analysis and was actually kind of like a little talking point, I was hoping for a place to put it in, so thank you. Pie charts, like the size of the pie matters. Kane County has been intentionally fiscally conservative for a number of years. And as a result, we find ourselves in a position where we are victims of our own efficiency. By comparison to the other collar counties, the general fund budget per person is $283. In Lake, $250, in DuPage, $363 in Will, and $238 in Kane County. As a result, our pie is smaller to begin with. And there is a function of each of these offices that is not necessarily related to the size of the pie. The sheriff has to do his job regardless of how big that general fund budget is. State's attorney and the public defender and courts. So your point is well taken. It is something that we need to be aware of whenever we consider any items that are part of your budget. But it is, we are a sort of a victim of our own fiscal conservancy over the last several years.
And if I may, I do want to point out that the state's attorney's office requires people to have advanced degrees. We have to have a Juris Doctorate. So what that means is that they also have to pay their school loans back. And that really has not been taken into consideration. And for everything that I'm saying now about the state's attorney's office, all of you need to look to my right at the public defender. Her office would need the exact same thing that I would need. She also has to have a law degree. Her employees, her attorneys have to have law degrees. So when you're looking at this for us, I don't want you to forget the public defender's office because they just recently came up to the same rate as us. So if you're looking for all of this, do not forget that this has to be the same for her office because she has the same struggles that I do in losing people and trying to rehire or trying to hire people to come do the great work that they do.
Any other questions for the state's attorneys? Ms. Combs?
Mr. Chair, I just want to, you said something and I wrote it down because I haven't heard it before. We are victims of our own efficiencies. And that resonates with me. And, you know, when you go to a restaurant and you order that pie of pizza and you have 10 people at the plate or at the table, but you keep inviting more people every year, I think it's time to family size. So all relative, it's all relative.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Hunt, Ms. Mosser, for this very telling, realistic, and sobering presentation. It's something everybody on the board needs to be aware of, and we have to address it now. So thank you very much. Anything else from the state's attorney's office? If not, thank you once again. We'll move on to the public defender's office. Ms. Conant.
Thank you. Good morning. Our reports are on file. One of the things that I was going to talk about this morning is kind of now very relevant. Over the last year, I have talked about the number of attorneys that we have lost in our office. And so right now, we're luckily down to one open spot that we have had for quite some time now. So what that means is that our misdemeanor division is quite a lot of very young attorneys or attorneys with 1 to 2 years of experience. So as to the question of training, I don't have dollar figures for you, but what we are starting is a training series for those attorneys that is going to be put on by the supervisors, myself, and our senior attorneys in our office. So that's a lot of time and effort on all of their parts. It is starting out as we are going to be doing it one day each month throughout the year. So we have something planned for the whole year. But that's just a little bit of a picture of what it takes to train the new attorneys. And that does not count when they start. We give them at least 2 weeks of one-on-one attention with a supervisor. So that supervisor is taken away from their other duties just to focus on these new attorneys. And so when we are in the situation that we were last year, where we were having such high numbers of turnover, that means that those supervisors are not only covering calls for attorneys that we lost, but also training. I myself, I have been doing the DUI misdemeanor court for almost a year now because we are short an attorney there. So it is more than just the training that is the cost, but it is also the cost that I know that all departments are doing, where people are having to pitch in and cover duties and positions that they were not hired to do. So just a little bit of, not numbers, but a little bit of a snapshot of what that training entails. The second thing that I wanted to comment on is something that Sheriff Haynes said in his presentation. And he talked about the severely mentally ill in the jail. And I just wanted to voice my concurrence with him and his frustration. We see this in the public defender's office every day with the severely mentally ill that are our clients that are in the jail and not being moved efficiently and quickly to the Department of Human Services. I know that this is a threat to all of the guards at the jail. It is also a threat to our clients who continue to deteriorate in the jail, pick up new charges, unfortunately, and are not getting the help and assistance that they need. So I just wanted to point out my a full agreement with him on that issue that he raised in his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Ms. Conant? You know, just one point I'd like to make. Mr. Tepper brought up the fact that he'd like to find out what the cost is to replace an assistant state's attorney or a public defender. And I think if you look at it realistically and you say a starting person starts at $62,000 and say that person leaves after a year or two, with them leaving, hiring a new person and getting them up to speed, I think it equates to somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 of an annual salary. So it is substantial. And it's something that we can remedy if we get pay equity for all of our attorneys. And if we do that, we will remedy that problem. So that's a very large expense that we can remedy, and there's a simple way to do it. Not easy, but it's very obvious. So thank you very much, Ms. Conant. Appreciate the report.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I
Ms.
have a
Combs.
question. As it relates to the transfer of our mental folks to IDHS and the delay that is now new, may I ask this question? Where do they go? Because I've had the conversation with some folks, and the delay is basically a kick the can as far as I'm concerned, because we don't have the staffing, we don't have the facility, we don't have the bed. Well, nobody does, FYI. Where do they go?
You mean while they're waiting or when they leave us?
Well, if
In the time
they,
window.
let's say they leave us within a certain time period, and that's the question that was posed to me, where should we put them?
Well, the state puts, I'm not sure if I entirely understand the question. The state puts them, when they leave us, they'll typically go to Chester Mental Health Facility, which is down.
So
south.
if Chester Mental Health doesn't have a bed,
Mhm.
but they're required to pick them up,
Yes,
where do they go? That's the question that was posed.
our
to me.
mental health cell block.
Thank you. And so that was, that's something that I'm not getting through to them on the issue, because it's a bigger issue. It's not just, well, we're going to delay it because we can't handle it. It's a bigger issue.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask those.
And our jail has some of the most robust mental health care. that
Sure.
Any jail does. And just think of all the other 101 jails across the state that
Right.
don't provide much of what we do. How those people are languishing.
Okay.
So it's a serious statewide issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gums. Good question. And Sheriff, thank you for once again letting us know what's really going on there. Anything else? If not, we'll move on to judiciary and courts. Chief Judge Hall.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to start by turning it over to Jason and then I'll have some comments. Good morning. We thought it would be appropriate to the newer members here and the existing members of the committee to put together a short presentation on our justice system strategic plan. We've mentioned the strategic plan in a limited capacity in our last couple of meetings, but I wanted to give you some context on how it came to be and where we plan to go over the next 6 months. Our plan from the outset of the strategic planning committee, which was fully formed for our first meeting in September of 2021, was to be unified in making court and overall justice system improvements. She's not here, but I'd like to thank Chair Molina and Madam Chair personally for their ongoing support. Madam Chair came to our Feb 2 meeting and had some really kind words of support for our entire committee. So I just wanted to thank her kind of on the record. I also want to acknowledge Chief Judge Hall for facilitating the development of this and for recognizing that the justice system is a system, but too often we have operated in silos. This process, I think, has changed that for the better. I think a prime example of that is our state's attorney and public defender. And the words that they said to each other this morning, I think really represent kind of how this committee has felt about each other overall. And I don't think that's a result of the strategic plan. I think that's a result of putting the right people where they need to be. Next slide, please. This particular slide, the process is represented by this, included every agency that we felt was relevant to the justice system for this process. I know this slide looks like the car in front of you this morning that had too many bumper stickers on it. But it really brings home the level of departments that were involved in this process. And I'm proud to say that everyone at this table and a lot of the people in this room have participated in this process. Next slide, please. As illustrated here, we met for the initial planning process in the beginning of September 2021. And just some of the challenges I remember at that first offsite meeting, when anybody spoke, we all had a mask still draped on our ear. That was just some of the challenges we were facing at the time, but we felt the process was important enough to kind of fight through that. And that was our level of commitment, even during those challenging times. All justice system leaders were at the table, as well as line staff from nearly every agency, so that voices from all departments and all tiers of the process could be heard. It was very collaborative and data-driven and came to a consensus around 4 big strategic focus areas. These areas are listed in no particular order on the next slide and are equally important to how the justice system we feel should function overall. The first is justice system infrastructure. That includes our court locations, facilities, physical space, access to services, technology, and safety and security. Number 2 is our justice system reform and continuum of services and programs. I'll be brief on that one. That really encompassed the Safety Act and expanding the use of existing community resources. Workforce excellence as recruitment, retention, well-being of our staff. And then last but certainly not least is public trust and understanding, which we all know the importance of that. Our commitment to increasing the public's understanding of our justice system and maintaining the public's trust and confidence. Each of these focus areas include our full list of initiatives and goals we would like to see completed or in the process of being completed between July of 2022 and July of 2025. As it relates to our year 1 goals of the justice system strategic plan, We broke this down further into a list of initiatives for the first year or our year one goals, with each of the 4 strategic focus areas receiving 2 initiatives in year one. Next slide, please. To illustrate what this looks like, you can see that the 8 initiatives listed here correspond to each of our big 4, if you will. For example, justice system reform and continuum of services is represented by our Safety Act implementation team. Workforce excellence is represented by our modernization of human resources team. Each team has a team lead, a judicial or judge sponsor, and personnel who are currently on the original strategic planning committee and members who were added at the formation of these teams. So our original strategic planning committee was 28 members. We had 1 retirement, which was Mr. Naughton, and 1 relocation. So we have 26 of our original 28 left. And we're up now with the full teams to almost 50 people at our last meeting. So we really have a lot of personnel that are working on these initiatives. Their goal is to complete or have in process a list of year one deliverables by July of 2023. To go into more detail on the inner workings of each team, their list of goals for year one, and an update on their progress, we will have the lead from some of our most active teams report monthly at this committee between now and July. Our goal into July and beyond is to give you regular updates on the work and progress of the justice system strategic plan, and to work with all of you collaboratively as we move toward completing priorities for this circuit. And with that, I can take any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
I will say I'm gonna send a copy of the strategic plan out to the full committee, as well as our operational plan. It is on the 16th Judicial Circuit website, but I'm gonna send a copy to you personally.
Thank you very much, Chief Judge Hull.
Just a couple things. I mean, so one, again, the idea of the strategic plan was, again, when we all appear in front of you, there's the siloed, or it's always been the siloed approach where one office comes and asks for something, and then another office comes and asks for something. And it was pointed out, Bill, by you and by some others, that said, you know, it would be great if the justice system could come to us together to address the concerns and that you need and the needs that you have. So that's how the idea was born. We were able to receive a grant. So we had a national facilitator that helped us through the process. It didn't cost anything initially. And so she's done a fantastic job kind of helping us lead. What is of interest to me, and I think to you as well, is when you think about the amount of time that you as individual board members have spent the last 2 days, you've spent those 2 days on 2 of the initiatives that 30 of your employees all identified as well. One, infrastructure. So yesterday I watched as the admin committee talked about the space needs and the space plans and the long-term planning that you have to do. And so, you know, one is I just want to say thank you as a county board for taking that on. I know that there's a lot of tough conversations, but in the end, what you've heard when you put all those people together that were not board members, what they identified as one of the most pressing needs for Kane County is space and how we're going to address that space. The second issue, and one of the most important that was identified, was competitive pay. And so what I would say is, you know, I wrote down notes as I heard Terry talking, and I appreciate all the information that he did and he put together. It was wonderful. What I wrote down is we rise and fall together. So one is I want to commend Terry on the work that he did. What we need to do from a strategic planning process is to bring all of that to you, because as the state's attorney said, you can do this for the state's attorney, and that would be great. But in the end, public defender's going to come to you, circuit clerk's going to come to you, because we do as a system rise and fall together. So we are excited to see the work that Terry's done. We're excited to see what he's identified. What the strategic plan has to do is to present that information to you so that it's a collective approach, not just one office. And I want to make sure that, again, I emphasize that in no means am I trying to say that, you know, I mean, the state's attorney has to advocate, as does the chief judge, as does the clerk. But from a bigger picture perspective, what we need to do is try to compile those same numbers. And Terry and the state's attorney have always been wonderful about saying, hey, we're happy to help. So Terry will be, I think the strategic plan will be calling you to, we'll be calling you to try to get that same, get that same information together. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to mention with the state's attorney, when we do talk about that cost, again, Bill, that you were talking about the training costs. I echo what the state's attorney and Ms. Cohen said about ultimately, again, the Supreme Court last year passed time standards that says that the courts need to resolve cases in an efficient manner and starting to put time standards on those. When an assistant state's attorney leaves, when an assistant public defender leaves, what ends up happening is that the state's attorney or the public defender have to get a new attorney. They have to get brought up to speed. And during that period of time, nothing can get done on that case. And it really is justice delayed is justice denied. The older a case gets, the harder it gets to get resolved. So again, when and I know that when I look around the room, I know some of us have seen that I Love Lucy, where the chocolates just keep coming, and that's the cases keep getting filed. So ultimately, when we talk about the turnover in the system, it definitely impacts how fast we can move cases. So it's a long way again to echo we rise and fall together. But I want to just particularly point to my left with the circuit clerk's office. I think sometimes we miss or we gloss over the importance of the circuit clerk's office. The court system doesn't run without the circuit clerk's office. And no, if we're standing there and the cases aren't there, if we're standing there and we can't get those cases and orders processed, we're back to the I Love Lucy analogy. So I appreciate the work that everybody's been done. I appreciate that you're looking at this. And I think from a strategic plan process, what we owe you is an analysis, just like Ms. Masser and Mr. Hunt did, but from the public defender's perspective, the judiciary has a very small piece of that, and then from the circuit clerk. So the only other thing I'd say is the Safety Act. It's this hiatus right now. We're waiting for the Supreme Court. I've got to be honest with you. It's kind of nice not to be spending as much time as we are, but we're again collectively waiting, and we'll be prepared for the Supreme Court decision.
Any questions for the Chief Judge? If not, thank you very much for the
Thank you.
presentation and for the information. And I think this whole situation comes down to what you are doing in your study, and you, Terry, and yours. We have to prioritize what the real needs are. And then once we have, and we've identified the monies needed to satisfy these priorities, we then have to look at how we're going to fund that. There are some options. None of them are attractive, but they're needed. So I always talk about needs and wants. Well, it's also the same way with respect to revenues. So I appreciate all the reports and the information we've received. If nothing else, thank you very much. We'll move on to court services. Ms. Ost.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
So I have been playing with a new statistical presentation. And Blair, if you don't mind, could you pull up that portion for me? And not knowing that we were going to be talking a lot about turnover and training costs, that is the entire top section of my new statistical report to you. I'll let you know, I really don't like how this translates when it gets to the agenda packet. So I'm going to change how it looks a little bit. I think the graphs are too big. They're not readable, things like that. So clearly I have some work to do in making that more readable for you. But I want to take some time to go over kind of those things sheet by sheet, just to give you some familiarity with what we do. And I'm trying to give you a big picture overall of the work that we do for you. So the top section, I intend to talk each month about how many resignations I had in the last month, what my employee turnover is for that month. And so for the month of January, we had 4 resignations. We also had 4 hires, but those 4 hires that we hired were for resignations that had happened in October and November. So I'm still behind the 8 ball on that. The grid below that, I wanted to give you a snapshot of the kind of trainings that we're doing in-house, because I do often talk about the kinds of trainings that we're doing. And in light of the conversation this morning, I'm going to add a column that describes the training costs for all of these associated trainings, because many of these trainings are mandates. And so we have to do them when we have turnover. So we are mandated by the Illinois Administrative Office of Illinois Courts, which is run out of the Supreme Court, to do risk assessments. Well, you have to take a class on that, and you have to be certified in that. And so every new probation officer has to go through that, and that's a full week. We teach people in pretrial the mandates and the basics of the fundamentals of pretrial. It's its own branch of law. It's got a huge act, the Pretrial Act, within the statutes. And there's a lot to learn there. Core correctional practices. We are your arm of community corrections. And so we have to teach the foundations on that. Case planning, that is what probation officers do. So we have to teach them how to case plan. One thing I want to talk about or highlight is that the JJC, the Juvenile Detention Facility here in Kane County, we are mandated by federal law to get a audit every 3 years for something called the PREA Act, the Prison Rape Elimination Act. This was a federal law that was signed into law by President Bush in 2003, and it does require a full audit every 3 years. We're getting geared up for that. As has been noted at a Human Services Committee meeting, the JJC did experience a 47% turnover in the last 2 years. So we've done a lot of training to bring our staff up to speed and to be fully compliant with that act. Criminogenic needs, again, with that high turnover, we have to teach people what drives crime. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about why people commit crime. And really, it's kind of predictable and it's sad, but it's childhood abuse, it's family dysfunction, it's poverty, and not just poverty, but poverty within a broader context of some dysfunction and some personal dysfunction, as well as a lot of people that we see, especially in our drug courts, once we get them clean and sober, what we find is overwhelmingly they have some underlying mental health concerns. A lot of these people are self-medicating. They either have trauma histories that are really, really bad, or they have a chemical imbalance in their brain and they're trying to self-medicate. And that's a lot of the work that the drug court does with these people. It's very intensive work. We have to train ourselves on essential employment laws, and that's something that we've talked about periodically. Kane County does have a wonderful HR department. I love that our HR people, but it's very small. And so each of the different offices has to have their own HR trained people. And EMDR, we have to do ongoing training for our psychology staff. They're professionally licensed and we have to maintain their licensure and they need to learn and grow. On the next page, Blair, these are the treatment services that we are providing for our constituents who are on caseload. These are people who live in Kane County. We are not using general funds to pay for these treatment hours. We're using something called probation fees. To this grid, I'm also going to add the grant dollars. See what happens when you look at it critically in the morning and I'm like, oh man, we're missing stuff. So I'm going to add a column here for the grant dollars that we've received and all the treatment that we're providing, because we are paying entrance fees for halfway houses, for quarter houses, recovery homes. We're paying for people to get domestic violence counseling, again, with that idea that we're trying to keep families together and we're trying to prevent future abuse. And so we want to try to really get at what are the underlying criminogenic needs that people have and how do we begin to address them. We do, by statute, sex offender treatment is something that we can pay for wholly with probation fees. My personal philosophy is these people live in our community. And so it behooves us to get them treatment and to get them better when we can, especially when they're juveniles. Their brains are elastic and people are often surprised how well they respond to treatment and to things like family counseling, because some of these issues can be helped in the home with better safety plans, better rules, better boundaries. And so we work hard on that. The graph under that, you can see is our Juvenile Justice Center. We do, as a reminder, the whole state of Illinois only has 16 of these juvenile detention facilities. And so each juvenile detention facility takes contracts from surrounding counties in order to meet the needs of the state. So this graph shows you with our contract partners how many juveniles we're holding on behalf of other counties. And as a reminder, that is a revenue line item that does go directly into the general fund. We get reimbursement from those counties to Kane County to help pay for that. The next page is our pretrial. This is the first time that you're seeing this data. This is one of those graphs that didn't translate well to your packet, and I apologize. They'll have white backgrounds next time, and I'm going to redo how those look. But I wanted you to see that just in January, we processed 339 people through bond call. And I know with the Pretrial Fairness Act, there's been a lot of discussion about what does this look like? So we did 339 arrests that were processed through bond call in January. Of those, you can see this is our supervision level ordered. And so supervision level in probation, we have far too many people on caseload to see everyone weekly or even everyone monthly. And so we do these risk assessments, as I talked about earlier, just a minute ago, that helps us do what we call differential supervision. So we pour a ton of resources into our high risk people. And if you're low risk, first-time offender, or someone who's not likely to reoffend, we don't pour so many resources into you so that we can take those resources and focus more on the high-risk people. And so you can see about 26% of the people who came through bond call were found to be about low risk and really didn't require many conditions to be placed on them. 38% were about medium risk, and 36 were high risk. Now, one important note is that this is kind of an actuarial table, like the way an insurance company would look at you. So I'm saying out of every 100 people who are high risk, 36 of them will reoffend. And the reoffending rate or the odds of that, even for a high risk person, is still only 50-50. So there's still a lot of reassurance there that with the right conditions, these people will be able to remain in the community under the appropriate supervision level. And then the next graph is a snapshot of who we actually have on pretrial services right now that we are actively monitoring. So you can see it's just over 3,000 people are currently on active caseload for our pretrial caseload. And of those, almost half are maximum. And again, we like seeing that because what that means is that the judges are for the most part recognizing their risk, or not for the most part, that was bad. They are recognizing their risk level, and we're pouring most of our resources into the high risk people, and we're not pouring so many resources into low risk. One of the ways that we assist the court is we make sure that we are in contact with all of our pretrial people, making sure they attend their court dates. So just like your doctor's office, your dentist's office, we're giving you text reminders that you've got court coming. If for some reason that text bounces back, we get a report, every single person whose phone did not accept the text, and then we're calling them. So it's not just we're texting you and then it's up to you. Like we're calling you, we're asking for phone numbers of family, friends, and we're reaching out, trying to get a hold of you to let you know you have court. On the next page, this is another graph that did not translate well. I'm going to work on this, but generally speaking, what this says is that for juvenile probation, the court services, we also monitor and actively supervise juvenile diversion from court, as well as juveniles actively placed on court. So we have right now 422 juveniles that we are supervising altogether, and it's in one form or another. And next month, in fact, for the juvenile probation and juvenile diversion, I'm going to bring LaTanya Hill with me, who is a director in the probation department, and she's going to give a presentation on juvenile services in general for the county so that we can bring you up to speed on that. Adult clients supervised. These are different categories of supervision. But again, altogether, you can see we have 2, 3, 4, almost 5,000 people on caseload that we are supervising in one form of another on supervision. And part of these, that admin category is an interesting classification. Those are people who live here but committed a crime in a different county. So they went to DuPage and did a domestic violence or whatever they did. So under the statutes, people should be supervised where they reside. And that's what I was referring to earlier with the sex offenders. Even if a person from Kane County solicits an underage prostitute or does a sex crime with an underage person in another county, I want to know who they are. I want to know where they live, and I want to make sure that they're getting treatment. And so those people we're supervising actively. And so we have different categories. They're technical, but just know that we are supervising them and we're getting a handle on who they are and where they live, and making safety plans, doing searches if we need to do searches, things like that. Problem solving courts on the next page. We do have currently 3 problem-solving courts. We have our drug court, our veterans court, and our mental health court. We call that the treatment alternative court. We've put in an application to the AOIC to be recognized for our DUI court. And so that is coming. We are in the middle of looking at really strategically everything that we do with those courts, and revamping them, probably upping the personnel and the staff that belong to those courts, reorging them a little bit. And so I'll be talking to you about that in the future. As well as I want to let you know that we did over 800 drug tests in January. And interestingly, the majority of positive tests that we get, we call them medical compliance. So once we figure out that they have an underlying mental health concern, for example, and they need to go on some kind of medication, we'll do a drug test to make sure they are taking their meds. So a lot of our positives are actually medical compliance is what we're looking for. But of those 800 tests, we do have some positives. It's only 3% that were for illicit substances. And as you can see, 23 were for cocaine and 5 were for opiates, which is pretty amazing. I don't know if it was because it was cold out. We'll see. We're going to track this over the coming months and we'll see how that number changes. And then for client contacts, with all of these people on caseload, just in January alone, we did almost 1,500 client contacts. And those are field visits where we're going to their homes, meeting with them in their home, seeing what their environment looks like, talking to their family who may reside there. If they're on something like drug court, we may, ask them, can we look in your trash? Because we're looking to see, are there empty beer cans, whatever it is that we're looking for. If they're a juvenile on caseload, we may say, hey, can I see your room? A lot of times they're proud and they want to show us their room. They're proud of the posters on their wall. But sometimes then we're able to go back to the parents and say, hey, did you kind of see that theme that was going on in the room? And we're able to have a discussion with them about appropriate parenting and what may be going on with their son or daughter that they weren't seeing. And so those have been incredibly useful and valuable to us. And that was just in January, as well as the other contacts are, seeing people in the field, meeting them at libraries, phone calls, things like that. And so this is, I intend to update this clearly, and I want to expand on it, and I'm going to give this to you every month. I'm not going to go through it every month. It'll probably just be on file, but I do want you to see the kind of work that we're doing.
Thank you, Ms. Oss. Any questions? Not, thank you once again. Appreciate
you.
it. Moving on, we'll go to the circuit clerk, Ms. Ferrero.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank Judge Hull, Chief Judge Hull, for pointing out that the circuit clerk is also in the same boat as everyone else. A lot of times we're considered the training ground for the county, and it's kind of insulting because it does take approximately 8 to 10 months for a clerk to get into the courtroom. And currently we are down 10 clerks for courtroom. For a courtroom and statute that we have to have a clerk in the courtroom. Each courtroom, we have 32 courtrooms. Thank God for Zoom because they have been able to actually take care of 2 Zoom sessions at once to eliminate some of the, overhead because we don't have the staff. And when you don't have the staff and you push folks into the courtrooms, then they make mistakes. And we don't want them to make mistakes because it's a domino effect for all of us through the county. I would like to point out it's the same old song and dance that we've all been talking about this whole hour and a half. But in the circuit clerk, the 16th Judicial is in Zone 5 with the state. And we are currently 4th to bottom as far as starting pay goes. So we are also addressing that because we do have union negotiations in December. So we are all addressing that. All of the previous or other circuits, they have gone over their starting pay and they have upped to $3. So I just want to give everybody a heads up that that's going to be coming down the pike soon. Same thing. We lost 2 clerks last week. One we had for a little over a year. Phenomenal clerk. Great clerk. We hated to see We knew it was coming. He went to DuPage County for 40,000. I'm not going to hold a clerk back for 10,000 extra dollars. It's just not right. The other clerk took a bailiff position. Again, more money, less hours, less stress. So we lost 2 clerks. Again, it takes 8 to 10 months to get a clerk in the courtroom. When we're down, it puts a lot of stress on senior staff that they have to sit with the clerks to help train them because we only have 1 trainer. Supervisors have to sit with clerks and train them. Then they can't do their supervisory jobs. So that's a big stress on our whole staff. We have also gone to ZipRecruiter, and we did see some applications come through that, but we haven't been getting any from LinkedIn or Indeed or HR.gov because our pay is just too low. I would like to point out in your packets, there's some totals that you need to look at that our clerks actually process. And these are very important. In criminal new cases for 23, they process 3,088 cases. Civil, a little over 1,100. Family, 338. Probate, 88. It's a total of new cases filed just in January is 4,645. Phone calls that our office receives, because we are basically the answering machine for the county. Everyone that needs something through judicial generally either calls the circuit clerk or the sheriff's office, actually. And then we reroute those phone calls. We had 6,672 calls just for January. For files that were scheduled for court, total is 13,212. E-file cases for January alone, e-file transactions, for January alone was 25,565. Okay. We currently are down 10 clerks. We do have 22 vacancies. And right now we have a total of 90 employees throughout the circuit clerk's office. They also have processed 17,000 echo orders, which is huge. That's also judges signing orders, et cetera, that all go on in the courtrooms. With that being said, the county really needs to, and you both discussed this, Chairman Leonard and Ms. Gumbs have both addressed this, that we need to find another funding source. I was asked this week, I spoke at an event, and I was asked if the circuit clerk's office is considered the revenue source for the county. And I had to pause because the misconception is yes. The reality is no. And we used to bring in $57,000 a month to help the judicial system. That doesn't just all go to the circuit clerk's office. That goes throughout all of us. Last month, 22,000. This has been happening since before COVID. This has been happening since the Safety Act. This is a huge issue, and the monies are not coming in on the backs of those that create the crimes. And this is a reality that I think that Kane County needs to address and needs to seriously look at. I also want to point out that when I was a county board member, which I really hate to say because I know how much you all hate that, but when I was a county board member, we did address the motor fuel tax and the disparity for, I think it's 80% goes to transportation and 20, I could be wrong on these percentages, but I know that it's in that area. And 20% goes to fund judicial. In DuPage County, all of it goes to fund judicial. And this is something that when state's attorney at the time, McMahon, myself, several other county board members, several of us here on the judicial right now, tried to change the mindset of county board members. It's up to the county board to change those allocations. And I think it's time that they really look at that and reconsider that. There is funding there that could be used for this detrimental ongoing staff issue we have with the judicial partners in Kane County. I think the reality is this is not a training ground anymore for us. We need to take our employees seriously. We need to appreciate them. We need to pay them. And as far as the constituents and the public, we need to take them seriously. We're giving them a disservice when we cannot train and pay our employees properly. And this is, please take a look at those amounts. I would love for anyone to bring up this conversation and have meetings going forward so we can revisit that. I know that there's millions that have to sit to get grants. And the reality is we need those millions now before we lose more staff and before we cannot operate the courts. If I don't have clerks, we can't have court. And if we can't have court, then the counties stand still. So I think it's a very important issue. And I think I would appreciate everybody to take a look at that. Any questions?
I just have a comment.
Yes, Ms.
I just
Gomes.
want to thank you for bringing up the public and our constituents. When I do meetings monthly, sometimes several times a month, is something that I speak about. And to tell them the truth is not hard. Again, I'll say it again, it's a courageous thing, but you have to tell them the truth. And they get it. They really do if you just tell them the truth. So we have to keep them in mind also. Here we all sit and talk about different things and we, that's our goal. But they're the ones we're serving. And if we can't do that properly, we're doing a disservice to them.
Very true. Thank you, Ms. Gomes. Anything else for Ms. Burrow? Thank you, Ms. Burrow.
Thank you.
Once again, another very, very good presentation. It's bringing into focus the realities of the operation of Kane County, specifically the Judicial and Public Safety Committee, and the need to find ways to fund the needs. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So thank you very much. Moving on to the coroner, Mr. Russell.
Hi, it's Lauren with the coroner's office. Our report is on file. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Any questions for the coroner? No, thank you very much. Appreciate the report, and we do have it on file. Moving
Thank
on,
you.
any old business?
Before we,
Yes, Mr. Roth.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who gave presentations today. It was very helpful, especially being a new member to get up the learning curve. So I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Any old business? I don't know of any. Moving on, I'd like a motion and a second to place the
Motion to
reports on.
adjourn.
I'd like to put the reports on file first. Moved by Mr. Williams,
Roth will
seconded by
second it.
Mr. Roth. Please take one on that.
Yes.
Linder,
Yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Pepe, Williams,
Williams, yes.
Leonard.
Yes. Reports are placed on file. And finally, I need a motion and a second for
that motion
adjournment.
to
Mr.
adjourn.
Williams to adjourn.
I'll second it.
And Mr. Roth, all in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Motion's